Hello again. In this tutorial, we're going to have a quick look at some of the shortcut operators that are available in Java. And again, we're still using the IDE Eclipse, and you can see that I have that open here. So I'll click OK. And it's going to remember where we last left off. So you can see the previous program, the previous tutorial that we did right here. So I'll go over here to Project 1 and drop down and close that project. So it's usually a good idea when we're going to create a new program to create a new project space for that. So here in the Package Explorer, I can just right-click and say that we want a new Java project. And keeping with the naming convention that we had previously, Project 1, we'll just call this one Project 2. And realistically, I'll delete these projects a little bit later on. In this case, we can just click Finish and come over here inside of source, and you can see that we don't have anything. So I'll right click on project 2 and say that we want a new class. We'll call this one driver, just like we did last time. And I'll click finish. And it gives us this default code that technically compiles, but it doesn't really do anything. So let's come on the inside of this and we'll say public static void main string args with the brackets, an opening curly brace, and we get a closing curly brace. And again, just as a review, remember main is really important because it represents the entry point into the program. So let's declare a variable, and I'll come down here, and remember to declare a variable, it's always the data type, and then the variable name, and then a semicolon. So in this case, let's work with an int, or an integer, and we'll just call it x, even though that's a horrible variable name. We'll just go with it. And I'll assign it the initial value 10. And so what we've done is to open up a chunk of memory called x, and it can hold an integer, and we've assigned it initially this value of 10. And just to prove that, we can do a system.out.println, and we'll say that x is, quote, plus the value of x. So in this case, we would expect that the output of this program is a simple program, but the output is just going to be x is 10. And again, just to remind you, to run this, I can come over here, click Run, and then save my changes. And then down here in the console, you can see x is 10, and then it terminated correctly. Okay, so what are we talking about some of these shortcut operations? Well, one of the things that I could do is I could say x gets assigned x plus 1. And you need to understand what's going on here. So we have to evaluate what's on the right-hand side first, and right now x is 10 because I haven't changed its value. And what I'll do is I'll take that 10, add 1 to it, so that's a sum of 11, and then I'll copy that back into the same variable here, x. So x is essentially getting updated by 1. But there are a couple of different things that we can do. Instead of just saying x gets x plus 1, there are shortcut operators that we can use instead. And they're a little bit tricky if you don't know what it is that they're doing underneath. So let's leave x alone for now. And we'll create another variable here, y. So I can say int y gets x plus plus. Now you have to be a little bit careful. What we're really doing is a couple of operations all at the same time. When I say x plus plus, that's the same thing as x gets assigned x plus 1. Now the question is, when does that occur? Because you can see that I'm also copying information over here into y. So the question then is, do I copy in a 10 into y, or do I copy in an 11? So this x plus plus is really just adding 1 to it, but it occurs after I've made the assignment into y. And to prove that, what I'll do is to come down here, and we'll do another system.out.println, and we'll say fine, x is, and then whatever the value of x is, which we expect to be 11, plus another string, and y is, plus the value of y. So if I were to run this at this point, might be a little bit of a surprise to you, but you can see that x started out as 10, that's from lines 4 and 5, and then we have x is 11 and y is 10. And again, that's because we took the previous value of x, which was 10, copied that here into y, and then we incremented x. So it's a little bit screwy. So this is one version that you're going to see quite a lot, especially when we get into loops. X plus plus is a pretty common kind of operation. But there's another version of that also. So watch this. Let's create another variable. Int z gets assigned plus plus x. Okay, now this one's slightly different because whenever you see plus plus x, that means this has the highest precedence. We have to do this operation first. So because x is 11 at this point, by the time we make this assignment, we're going to increment that 11 to a 12 and then copy that value here into z. So let's do this. In fact, out of laziness, I'm just going to copy this line right here. And we'll say that x is and whatever the value of x is, and then z is whatever the value of z is. And so when I run this again and save my changes, you can now see that x is 12 and that z is 12 as well. All right, so moving on a little bit further, let's start to change the value of x again in a slightly different way. Another common shortcut operation that you're going to see is something that looks kind of like this. X plus equals 2. And when I do this, in fact, I'll put a comment here, that's going to be the same thing as x gets x plus 2. So remember, the way that this order of operations occurs is that I'm going to take the old value of x, add 2 to it, and then copy that back into our variable x. So we can do the same thing that we did before. In fact, I'll just copy line 5 here. And then when we print this out and save our changes, you can see that we take this old value of x, which was 12, add 2 to it, and then copy it back here into x. So this is a nice convenient kind of thing, and it saves us some typing and is a nice abbreviation that we can use throughout our programs. So there's a couple theme and variations here also. Instead of just saying x plus equals 2, I could also say something like this, x times equals 2. Okay, and again, as a comment, I can put that this is the same thing as x gets x times 2. And out of laziness, again, I'll copy 14 and paste it right here. So you can imagine what this is going to do. And so when I come down here, we're taking the old value of x, which was 14, multiplying it by 2, and then we're copying that into x, so x is now 28. But watch what else I could do. I could say x mod equals 2. Or no, let's mod by something a little bit more interesting. How about 5? And so this is the same thing as x gets x modulus 5. And remember, modulus is something that you've probably seen a while back in your education. It's the remainder after doing a division. So let's take 17, copy that, and then I can paste it right here. And when I run this, you can see that x was previously 28, and now we've taken the remainder after dividing by 5, and you can see that that's going to give us the value of 3. You can see that right here in the output. So that's it for now, and we'll move on to the next tutorial.